dressing in his basement. He was a foodie. He loved to tinker around in the kitchen. He was making the dressing with his friend A.E. Hotchner, who is a playwright, and he was bottling it in old wine bottles and giving it to friends and neighbors for Christmas. And people would come back a couple months later, February, March, and say, hey, where's my second round of salad dressing? And in some conversation, someone said you should really try to sell it. I think there were some other celebrities at the time selling product, and he sold it at a local boutique grocery store here. The owner of that store said, hey, if you really want this to blow up, you should put your face on it. And Paul Newman was extremely humble, felt very lucky in life, didn't feel like he was anything special, just felt like he had been, had a lot of, lucky opportunities, so he didn't really want his face out there. He didn't feel super important. But once the salad dressing started making money, he put his face on it as an illustration and just called it shameless exploitation in pursuit of the common good, to exploit his celebrity if this salad dressing was going to make more money. And, he didn't need the money, so from the get-go he said, let's give it all away. And that's what he did. Every penny since 1982, now over $550 million, has gone to charity. And, a lot of what we do is just really based in his humbleness and his feelings about luck, that he had been given a lot of opportunity that was really not of his doing, that he looked the right way for movies, that he was born to the right set of parents in the United States, and he looked around and was very aware that there were, numerous people in populations that were not as lucky as he was, and that's, I think, really the basis for his philanthropy and why he wanted to give all the money to charity was, as he famously said, what could be better than to reach out to those less fortunate, and that was simply the way that he saw it, and really wanted that philanthropy to be his legacy. So it wasn't more complicated than that to him, and we carry that on, and we try not to make it more complicated either. So that's really the nature of the foundation. We have 4 different focus areas, and we give away about between $25 and $30 million a year. It all depends on the profits from the food business. We don't sit on an endowment. It's really in and out the door, and it's all in thanks to a very lean, hardworking team over at the food business who have developed and market over 300 products that are sold worldwide. So, and we have the dream job and the beautiful opportunity to help decide where those funds go. Where we think we can have the biggest impact. So that's the nature of why we do what we do, and just living on that wonderful philanthropy that Paul created.
Right. I agree with you. What a wonderful way to serve your neighbors there and help out your community. Now, we've noticed in several of Mr. Newman's movies there was like a Native American presence or some reference to Native people. Not too overt, but it's just kind of a natural part of what his movies were. Now, was that play any part in your focus on Native American topics and issues?
I don't think so. I think that, I think we've been supporting food access issues, nutrition more broadly, but really a kind of more refined focus on food access combined with nutrition education for more than 35 years. And I think when we looked around and just deciding how we would possibly evolve or refine our support, obviously there was a great need in Native communities, just like there are in other somewhat, rural communities, whether it be Hispanic communities or, and we knew, and I think it's actually waning, we knew that there was not a lot of large foundation giving in Indian country, and I know that based on recent information that is still declining, which is obviously incredibly unfortunate. We're hoping with our support we can bring more visibility and awareness to the needs. So that's another topic, but about 8 years ago, we made a very small grant for a program up in South Dakota. It was an adolescent or a teen cooking program, and that program has evolved over time, and we just we started going to different conferences and engaging with different Native communities and people who were very much in the know about what the needs were, and we just started adding to that group more grantees until it kind of became its own little portfolio within our nutrition focus area. And I think that looking back on Paul, I mean, he was, he had an interest in all people, and was just very interested in different cultures and people's needs, and where could he always be of the biggest assistance. And he didn't think too much about it. He wrote the grant checks and said, hey, if this makes one person's life better, then that's really all that matters. And we still have that attitude. If we can make grants that help change one person's life for the better, then that's really what it's all about. We hope for larger change, and that's part of the focus on why we are bringing certain grantees together in a peer learning format, which I know you're aware of. So we certainly hope for larger change at a systems level, and that generations can lead healthier lives or that families can lead healthier lives for generations to come, and that change is sustainable. But we also like to focus on just really helping one person at a time, and if that larger change doesn't happen, then that's okay. We hope that the organizations we've supported have been able to just make one person's life, better, and that was really Paul's philosophy. So, we're always looking for different communities where we can fill a gap, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, in many parts of America, particularly Native American areas, there's a major reliance on the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. We have noticed that, and actually it's part of an urban Native culture and rural Native culture, that we make jokes about commodities and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then there are urban areas of our country that have been referred to as food deserts, where the only things that are available in many of these areas are the fast food, greasy things, and hard to come by fresh fruit and fresh vegetables and things like that. So maybe give us an idea about your commitment to more of a nutrition rather than just stuffing your face, I guess, and how you educate people in some of these underserved communities.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you brought that up, because that's exactly the process that we went through about 7 or 8 years ago when we took a look at our focus area, and at that time it was actually called Hunger and Nutrition, and we were doing a lot of emergency feeding support, which is what I think was really popular to do. I mean, people just needed to get food, and so that's what you did. And we realized, there will always be a need for emergency feeding. There will always be a need for that hunger piece, but we realized we didn't have big enough dollars to really make a dent in emergency feeding. What we could give away was going to feed, people for a day. And there's much bigger funders who can kind of tackle that emergency feeding piece, but we noticed a lot of innovative work going on around food access, having incentives to use SNAP for fresh, produce, fruits and vegetables, and, incentives for WIC, the Women and Infants and Children program. And so we morphed our program really to be less emergency feeding, saying that's not really where our dollars can make a dent, but supporting these small organizations around the country in different communities, both rural, where it's, some grocery stores are an hour to 2 hours away, and even at that, they don't have the fresh and healthy food, or urban, which, like you're saying, the only options are corner stores that are selling junk food. So obviously the problem exists in both places, but we really evolved our support to support small organizations that were thinking innovatively about how to get fresh and healthy food, into the hands of low-income people who are mostly reliant on SNAP. And a lot of the work that we support are SNAP incentives, so philanthropic dollars that double the value of that federal support if you're using it for fresh fruits and vegetables. And that started out at farmers markets, which is fantastic, but we know that everybody can't get to a farmers market, and a lot of these farmers markets were very purposely placed in underserved communities so that people had easy access if they, didn't have transportation. But now that those SNAP incentives that, again, are doubled using philanthropy are scaling at retail grocery stores, which is obviously where the scale is. So that's what a lot of our support focuses on overall with regard to nutrition. And then there's the education piece, because you can't have the access without knowing how to prepare it so that it tastes good, why it's good for your body, how it's going to, help your kids be more attentive in school, sleep better, be more active, feel physically fit, and for you too. And then you can't have the education and know all about it, but not be able to have the access. So we really look for programs that are marrying those two, and we hope that that's making a difference, and that there's so much focus on that work around access and not just feeding to feed, but really thinking about how you create healthier generations to come, that that becomes so huge that it just becomes the norm. And I think that there's real change occurring there, and that's really how most people are thinking now. And I even saw it just on my recent trip to South Dakota, just people on the ground, local people that are so passionate about wanting to change the lives of the people in their community through gardens, changing school food, SNAP incentives, getting cooking classes to people. That's really the way things are moving now.
Okay, we're speaking with Kelly Giordano with the Newman's Own Foundation. She is the executive director. The reasons why you chose this Native American nutrition cohort, that intrigues me. How did that come about with this specific focus there?
Yeah, we about 5-6 years ago, we didn't really know what we were doing. We piloted kind of a collaborative group with 6 national organizations that focus on food access and nutrition education, and a lot of them work in Native communities. They weren't specific to that, but they created, we along with them created this peer learning concept of them meeting on a regular basis over a period of few years and discussing topics that were of importance to them, whether it was organizational issues, infrastructure, program expansion, growth, or specific to nutrition and food access. And they really found it very helpful to take time away from their day-to-day work, which can become very siloed, and have this opportunity provided by a foundation to have a space to share successes and challenges with each other, benchmark, share best practices, learn from one another in all areas of their organizational, issues where they struggled, but also in the nutrition work that they were doing. And they formed partnerships and have collaborated on projects and implemented a lot of things back in their own organizations that they learned from one another. And we thought, well, this peer learning concept's really interesting, and it's not too resource intensive, on the foundation's part. So the next group we launched it with was 9 organizations that we support that focus on food access issues specific to Native American communities. And the peer learning concept just, worked with the other group, and we launched it a year and a half ago with these 9 organizations doing food access in Indian country. So those 9 organizations support 12 different tribes across the country, and they now have had 4 different meetings, convenings, more to say, where they are, doing that same thing, just sharing their struggles, creating partnerships, building trust, creating relationships. I think that our motto behind that is really that no one nonprofit, no one foundation can solve these really big systemic structural issues alone. We really have to partner, and I think we see it as our obligation to create that space that makes it easy for organizations to connect with one another and hopefully collaborate down the road. So that's really the intent behind it. Connecting our grantees whenever we can for peer learning, whether it's in a formal peer learning cohort like this, or just email and phone connections to people that we know can be helpful to one another.
The fact sheet that I got about your group quote some statistics that I think most Native, at least journalists, are aware of, and those working in this area, that we have these huge amounts, huge percentages of Native American children who are dealing with being overweight or obese from the foods that they had been getting, and perhaps a lack of exercise or things like that. And of course, as in many categories, we're the top of the worst and the bottom of the best. And some of your data indicates a phrase called food insecure. Now, when you ran across these kinds of numbers, how did that strike you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just astounding. I think it's, one of the populations that has the highest rates of, overweight or obesity. I mean, there are other populations that, are on par. And when you think about, people in rural communities and their ability to get fresh and healthy food, I think what we think, and actually one of our charities who does work in this space, is that nobody's circumstance should prohibit them from having access to anything that allows them to lead a full and healthy and prosperous life. And I think that's really goes back to Paul's belief in luck, that your circumstances, born into them or fell into them, again, not because of your doing, that shouldn't prohibit you from having that opportunity to be healthy and prosperous. And those statistics really struck us, and obviously that's a major driver behind our support in Indian country, and hoping that more large foundations or individual philanthropy will participate. I mean, there are fabulous foundations that give in this area, that many of our peers, but I know that large foundation giving is waning, and I really think that the more people know about the statistics, the more people know about the great need here in our own country, and the lack of philanthropy that could do so much good. I think we hope over time that there's awareness brought to that. And there need to be partnerships and collaboration. And, I think what we also try to really do is understand what the needs are. We don't want to provide grant making that's prescriptive, because we can't pretend to know what the greatest needs are, but also how the people on the ground think that it's best to support and help those communities. We don't have all that knowledge, and we would never pretend to. So I think the importance of philanthropy providing flexible funding that lets the communities try out new strategies to seek change is really, really important. So I think, when we saw those statistics, when we knew of the great need, it was just a no-brainer for us to try to do whatever we could. And that comes in the form of grant support, but it also comes in the form of bringing people together to share with each other and provide that space. Because we know people are working so hard, it's hard to get out of your day-to-day and connect with other people who you can learn from. And if we can easily, if we can make that easy for the nonprofits on the ground, then that's our job.
Now, you mentioned earlier in our discussion that you had traveled to South Dakota. And if that was a recent trip, you must have gotten caught in those incredible, horrible conditions that Mother Nature is stuck them with right now.
Yeah.
Were you traveling through reservation country there?
I did. We were on Pine Ridge. We support we support 3 nonprofits that do work there, and another nonprofit that does work up in Rosebud, which I did not get to. We thankfully those communities where we visited were somewhat distant from the floods, but obviously we'd been in touch with them prior to, and many of them have family or friends that had been affected. Where we visited was not immediately affected, but we yeah, that actually where it was one of the Pine Ridge was one of the places where we made our first grant about 7 or 8 years ago to an organization called Partnership with Native Americans. But that was the first time I was able to visit and to see work, and we support organizations doing work, in other states and on other reservations. But this was the first time I was able to go see that work, and I think what really struck me is, we have email conversations and phone conversations with people doing the work, but it's really important to get out and see the work on the ground, because otherwise you don't get to meet the really, the local passionate local people that are there, who are the ones really engaging the communities and trying to make change and trying to better the lives for those around them. And whenever we can get out and see that work and meet those people, I think it just really brings it home how important it is to what we do, and to continue to support the need and fill gaps where we can, and again give people the freedom and flexibility to do what they do best to serve their communities.
Right. That particular Lakota reservation is contains some of the most proud Native American communities in the nation, yet it's many parts of it are suffering from rather abysmal economic conditions. Now, when you came away with your impression, did that give you a feel on the impact of your work, how you're doing, so to speak, and did you get some feedback?
For sure. I think with all of our work, I try not to get overwhelmed by how much there is still to do, because you think, gosh, there's so much philanthropy supporting good work, and there's so many nonprofits doing good work on the ground. There's so many passionate people just doing good. You think, how can there still be inequity? How can there still be issues to deal with? Because we see so much good going on, but we know in so many places there is still so much further to go. And I think that's definitely a frustration, I think, of the group that we're supporting. Is they knew they're doing wonderfully fabulous, innovative work and supporting people on a daily basis and making change, but there's still so much to do, and there's still so far to go, and you're working against structures that have been in place for hundreds of years. And I think we have to recognize that change takes time. Often it's not fast enough, and that's frustrating for, obviously, the nonprofits that work on the ground. That's frustrating for grant makers. But change does take time. But I think what I came away with was, especially just seeing that work in person and knowing that it's extremely similar to the other work we support in Indian country, is that people just want a better life. People want opportunity. There's hope, and people are hopeful, and there's passionate, hardworking people on the ground who are making it happen, and that's what you need. That's what you need, and it's happening.
The other groups that you work with, I think, 9 organizations altogether. Yes. Are they all in the same kind of areas of focus, or do you work with other groups for other topics?
This particular group is all focused on food access and nutrition education. Some of them do other things, but our support is specific to their nutrition work. So the work we do in Indian country is really a subset of our nutrition focus area. And we do support other organizations that do work in Indian country too, whether it's National Farm to School, Food Corps, Wholesome Wave. So this particular peer learning cohort is focused on food access issues in Indian country, but they're a specific group that's meeting over, a 2.5, 3 year period of time to learn from one another. But we do support other organizations that are not part of this peer learning cohort that also do work with Native American communities in a variety of ways, but also specific to food access. So we haven't gone, at least in Indian country, beyond the nutrition piece yet. That's where it currently fits within our focus areas.
Sure.
Not to say that we wouldn't. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Right, and sometimes your resources can be limited. Okay.
Correct.
Now, do you have any plans to expand your focus here, or work with any perhaps national Native organizations?
I mean, we're always open to that. We're constantly doing research on, organizations that would be new to Newman's Own Foundation for support. We are, in all of our focus areas, we're constantly evolving. We try to stay on top of the changing needs of different communities. We get a lot of feedback from our grantees on what the changing needs are. We get a lot of we get a lot of feedback actually from our grantees, or the nonprofits we support, on other organizations doing great work, and then we, reach out to them about possible support. So I think we're always open to that, and we not only open to it, we're always proactively researching how we might, expand in a certain focus area. And so I think that's we haven't started to research that yet specific to this, because we're still in the middle of supporting this group, but we're always trying to be out meeting new people and finding out about other good work going on and seeing where our funding might have an impact, recognizing gaps where that we can fill, where charities, are finding it hard to get support from other foundations or other philanthropy or government, and we like to fill those gaps, or new programs that might be a little too risky for other philanthropy, and we like to take that risk and support them. So we're always on the lookout for new and innovative work to expand what we're doing. So,
all right.
Of course, that's always an option.
Sure. Now, if someone was curious and wanted to know more about what your foundation is working on and perhaps future focus, how would they get in touch with you?
Sure. They can we'd love for them to go to newmanzownfoundation.org. They can also email us at info@newmanzownfoundation.org, and they will always hear from a person. So we, it's hard. A lot of foundations I know can't respond, but that email inbox does go to a person. It actually goes to multiple people, and we respond to every inquiry we get. So if people would like more information, they can certainly email us. There's a lot of information on the website. We'd love for people to poke around on there, and hope that they, are inspired by the work. And we're, in the spirit of Paul Newman and his legacy of philanthropy, we are just honored to carry that on the best way we can, and as he said, reach our hand out. That's our job. So.
Okay. Well, I think you're doing a good job, and your foundation has quite a positive reputation in the country, I think. So you're where you need to be there, I'd say. Well, Kelly Giordano, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me here on our little program here. I hope that we spark some interest there, and if there's anything we can ever do to help you along, please let us know.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope we've sparked interest too, and it's been my pleasure. You're a delight, so thank you so much for contacting us.
Oh, great. I'm getting hungry too.
Me too. It's about that time, right? Oh,
right.
It's a little earlier for you, I think.
Well, go out and have a salad with some Paul Newman dressing on it then. All right, thank you again.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
It's Kelly Giordano from the Newman's Own Foundation talking about her nutrition program. We're going to take a short pause here, and then we'll be back with Lenny Hayes to talk about Men's Mental Health Month and some of the problems and challenges facing Native American men. Stay with us here on The Brew, and we'll be right back. We're speaking with Lenny Hayes. We've got him on the line here with is it Tate or Tate Topa Consulting? How is that pronounced correctly?
Tate Topa.
Okay, my Lakota is not that good. So, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us here today. Now, I understand we're kind of in the midst of Men's Mental Health Month. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, We want to focus in on the kinds of things that face Native American men and later on the Two-Spirit members of our community. Now, first of all, and when we say Native men's mental health, maybe you can give us an idea of some of the challenges that are facing Native men today.
So one of the things that I've been doing nationally, traveling across the country, discussing the issue of sexual violence that's impacted on men and boys in our Native community. One of the things that I know of is that it's an epidemic that we don't talk about in Native community, but we also know that a lot of men are impacted by some form of childhood sexual abuse.
And that's, as you said, is something that we don't normally discuss, actually in practically any venue or forum, unless it's real specific. It's just something that we were, in many cases, brought up to have this attitude or this feeling about men in sexual situations that may not be part of their own family or community. Now, when we talk about projects like this, you mentioned sexual abuse and sexual assault. Is that the majority of the problems that Native men will be facing like that?
No, I mean, there's other issues that impact, Native men and community, like, in regards to addiction, depression, mental health issues, relationship issues, due to growing up maybe in a home that is dysfunctional, and a lot of issues that impact families. So, I mean, it's a wide span of issues that impacts men and our community. And we must remember, too, that a lot of the issues that we're facing today is the impact of colonization and the boarding school era. I've traveled the country discussing this issue and have been really impacted by some of the conversations that I've had with men. Last year I was in New Mexico presenting on this topic, and what I found really amazing was that there was 4 men who approached me, and it wasn't the day of the presentation, but it was the following morning, and these 4 men disclosed that they were sexually abused as children. One of them went as far as disclosing that he was sexually abused by his mother for 15 years. And so one of the things that I remember about the conversations with these men was the fact that they had a sense of relief that someone was talking about it. I, too, identify as a survivor of child sexual abuse as well as a adult rape that I experienced. And so for me, it was the healing process that I went through, and knowing that this is a topic that we don't talk about, and knowing that this is really impacting our men and boys in tribal communities. Because one of the things I always remind people of is that we don't wake up one day and say we're going to be perpetrators. Something happened to us to cause us to behave in a way that we act out that violence on others. It could be women, it could be children, it could be other men, because we just don't have that space to have discussion about the violence that we've experienced.
The topic of sexual assault on Native men and being in a family where perhaps a homosexual member may be ostracized, is that kind of an outgrowth of this macho warrior man attitude that many of us have grown up with?
Yes. I believe one of the things that I remind people, I identify as a two-spirit male, but in order to break down the stigma on sexual violence against men and boys, one of the things that I remind when I present on this topic is that my sexual violence as a child and as an adult does not define who I am as a two-spirit male. I was born a two-spirit male. And so, because often what happens is that when men or boys disclose that they were sexually abused, what often happens is that people assume that that individual is gay or may identify as a two-spirit male, and that's not always true. And so that's one of the biggest issues to why we don't have conversation about the impact of sexual violence on men and boys, is because people still think that violence that's perpetrated on men and boys means you're gay, and that's not true at all. In one of the research findings that came out by the National Institute of Justice research report, in their 2010 findings from the National Intimate Partner Sexual Violence Survey, what they found in their research is that 1 in 4 American Indian and Alaskan Native men have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. They also continue to say that more than 1 in 10 have experienced sexual violence with penetration. And overall, more than 475,000 American Indian and Alaska Native men have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. For me, as a mental health provider, one of the things that I believe is that those statistics are probably much more higher, because we have to think about the unreported, the men and boys who have not come forward to discuss the sexual violence that they may have experienced. One of the things that I also know of too, and I hear conversations about, is that often when a boy is sexually violated by a woman and he goes and tells another male, it becomes more like trivialized. I mean, they're praising him for what he experienced. And so this young boy may not even realize or know that he was sexually violated. So there's so many different things that are really impacting not being able to have this conversation about sexual violence.
Denial is a pretty strong force there. Now, as we deal with the topic, we have a focus there on what you've just discussed. The victim of a sexual assault can be mislabeled sometimes, or condemned, or victimized by the social media kind of thing. And that does not necessarily mean that they themselves were of the two-spirit feeling. Would you agree with that?
Well, I agree. I guess, can you repeat your question?
Yeah,
again?
I guess, do victims get unfairly labeled as being consenting or leaning toward a homosexual characterization or personality? I mean, do they get, say, okay, well, he got attacked and this happened to him. Does that mean he's gay? Have you run across that? Would you agree with something like that?
Oh, no, I don't agree with that. Because, and the reason why I say that is that often the perpetrator will pick out his or her victim. They know, and they begin to groom that individual. And so in other studies that have been done, there has been a high percentage of heterosexual men who have perpetrated on other men or boys, and we need to remember that when we talk about sexual violence or any other form of violence that's addressed on or put on another individual, it's all about power and control. It's not about the sexual act. So one of the things that I remind people when we talk about sexual violence against men and boys is that when you are sexually perpetrated on, that does not mean that you identify as gay. But
yeah.
Like one of the issues that we don't also talk about too is that what happens to your body when you're sexually violated. Often I hear stories of men or boys who don't understand that when you are sexually aroused, what may happen is that you may get an erection, and also that you may ejaculate through the rape. And so when that happens, men and boys will automatically think that, oh, I must be gay because I enjoyed this because this is what happened. So we don't have that conversation about, like, the body, what happens to the body when the body is sexually aroused.
Right.
And so, like, men and boys will instantly go to that place of, well, I must be gay. And then that's where they begin to not talk about what happened to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, a couple things that you've mentioned so far. Two-Spirit people once had quite an honored position in many Native communities. They were